So in the next, I guess, we can wrap up with your crystal ball. So, take your time. Let's all sit back and listen to Barak's crystal ball the next 3 to 5 years. And answer it however you will and like to. But, what should we be concerned about in the next 3 to 5 years? And where do you see opportunity to innovate if you're a startup?
Oh boy, that's not a fair question. I don't have a crystal ball. I hate predicting what's going to happen. The funny thing is that, sometimes, I end up being right over time, right? VC, so 20 years ago, predicting that a lot of companies are going to need to build security programs without, being able to afford or need for security departments. That was a prediction. Staked my income and career on it. Seems to have worked out. But to try and ask me what I think is going to be the most popular attack vector, instead of trying to predict anything, I'll tell you that this was an interesting one because everybody heard about SolarWinds and all of that, right? But it's not just SolarWinds, right? So there's a lot of these various embedded technologies that are all over the place that everybody's using. And I think that's not going to be the last one that we hear about. That's going to have some larger impact. And one of the reasons for that, and again, all of these changes have led to these blurring of boundaries, right? Blurring of responsibilities between the different organizations that are engaging in the use of technology to accomplish business goals, right? Used to be very clear definition of who owns what. When you ran your own systems in the golden age of the aughts, right? At least you owned the system top to bottom. There was a cable connected to the Ethernet card, and there was a very clear line. Behind the port is the other people, and inside of the machine or from the port is your stuff, right? We no longer have clear boundaries, right? It's completely fuzzy, and therefore all of these tools that end up being sort of like in the domain of in between become exposure points, and a lot of folks don't realize it. One of the best examples I can give you here is actually in ties back to what you asked earlier, and then I'll also share a little story too. But people always get really concerned about how, if you're a SaaS vendor, right, how your staff manages the infrastructure and customer data, and they ask a whole bunch of questions about, roles and security and background checks and this and the other. Oh, fine, whatever. If you want to go down that path, bully for you. But nobody ever, seems to be concerned about the fact that there is a group of hundreds of people in AWS, hundreds of people in Google, thousands of people at Microsoft that are the ones that manage all this virtual infrastructure. And if you have access to the hypervisor, you can read anything, right, in any customer's instance at any point, whatever you want, encryption keys, sensitive data, whatever you like. And we all assume that that's okay, right? So we never even bother to ask the question. Why? Because from a practical business perspective, you can't ask the question. If you went to a SaaS vendor and said, did you run background checks of all the NOC employees at Amazon? They're going to laugh at you. Of course they didn't. They can't. So we have to trust AWS. But it's a fuzzy boundary, right? We have no visibility into what's happening behind the scenes in GCP or AWS or Azure, right? We don't. We just assume that it's going to be okay. Why is that fine? Why is everybody living so comfortably with that and get all hot and bothered about how we manage encryption keys and all of that stuff that we talked about earlier?
Right.
And so it's the fuzzy boundaries that are going to continue to pop up. And the little story I'm going to share with you, this happened a little bit before SolarWinds became known, and it's actually a story I'm sharing also in more detail in my new book, which is The Security Hippie. But I have contacts in certain agencies that I talk to fairly regularly, and they ask me the same question. Like on an annual basis, I always get the conversation. I always dread that conversation, right? All right, Barak, tell us what you think is going to happen, right? The reason they ask me this every year is because it's happened in the past a handful of times where I told them what I think might happen and then end up happening. And like the reason I tie it to SolarWinds is that a few months before then, I spoke to one of these guys and I gave him my idea about this, shared infrastructure technologies, right? This concept of these things that sit in the boundaries, like the SolarWinds Orion. And I actually pointed him to a different, very large entity that was playing everywhere, but the concept was that one. And we talked a few months later, and the funny thing was that he said two things. He said, "It's amazing. You told me this thing. 2.5 months later, that very entity, had a breach that impacted thousands of organizations. Didn't actually make the news as much as SolarWinds did, but should have, in my opinion. And the amazing thing is nobody has heard about it before you said it. So like he was very happy because it made him look really good, because he has this like source on the street that gives him this great ideas. He says, but now I'm going to have to ask you again. Everybody's really interested in what you have to say. I'm like, I don't have it. I'm just telling you what I think. And please don't make me into some sort of weird seer. So I'm very afraid of making these kinds of predictions.